Welcome to CityWorks, a production of the City University New York School of Labor and Urban Studies and CUNY TV. I'm Laura Flanders. Every month, CityWorks explores the challenges and lived experiences of people working on the job, at home and in our communities. On today's program, the crisis of adjunct professors who are facing what some are calling the Uberification of higher education. More than half of all college courses in the U.S. today are taught by adjunct instructors, non-tenure track faculty, almost always working part-time. And they do it for less money, no benefits, and with almost no job security. How low is the pay? Well, according to one report, more than 1 in 4 adjuncts earn below the federal poverty line for a family of 4, even as tuition fees for students go up and up. Colleges and universities use the adjunct system to save costs, but adjunct faculty members on many campuses are fighting back, and some of the nation's largest labor unions have stepped in to help. Joining us today to help us get a better handle on the problem and what's being done to forge an equitable solution are James Davis, president of the Professional Staff Congress, which represents 30,000 faculty and staff at the City University of New York, and Anne Balay, a labor historian and organizer with SEIU Local 509 in Boston, where she's currently organizing staff at Boston University. Dr. Balay is the author of 2 books about queer labor, Steel Closets, Voices of Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Steelworkers, and Semi-Queer, Inside the World of Gay, Trans, and Black Truck Drivers. James Davis and Balay, I welcome you both to CityWorks. And James, first of all, in the interest of full disclosure, I have to say I am one of your members. Thank you for everything that you do. We really appreciate it. And you are currently in negotiations over the contract right here at CUNY, right?
We are. Thank you for having me.
We'll try not to get you in any trouble. And to you, what's it like being an adjunct? I understand you were one.
I was an adjunct for 21 years at a total of 16 institutions across the U.S. And I have a PhD, so I was that type of adjunct. And the teaching is fun. I loved it. I kept going back for more, but the pay is terrible and there's no job security and you have to go from school to school to support yourself. And, you know, I could tell you stories about how marginalized and disrespected you feel doing this work at higher ed institutions.
Some people call this whole layer of work contingent faculty. Is that the right term? How would you describe the group that we're talking about, James?
I think contingent faculty is a much better, more appropriate term now than adjunct faculty. Adjunct suggests that this is a teaching workforce that augments the regular workforce of the institution, but as you stated in your introduction, adjuncts or contingent faculty are now the normative workforce in the academy. So the nomenclature should shift to recognize that, and it helps us to name actually the structural change in the composition of the workforce.
How many people are we talking about? You have any idea?
Nationwide, my understanding is that around 70% of the current teaching faculty are off the tenure track. So, you know, this is a major shift over the past couple of decades.
And Anne, you were kind of discreet about your salary and working conditions, but tell us a little bit more. I mean, what are we talking about? When I saw that statistic about below the federal poverty line, I thought, well, don't colleges make an awful lot in fees these days?
Yes, and there's a huge variety in what adjuncts are paid. So I taught a course for $1,000, and that's a 16-week course. I've taught courses for $9,000. There's a huge variety. But in St. Louis, where I organized before this, I had an adjunct who routinely taught 32 courses a year in order to support himself. So you add them up, some at this school, some online, some here, some there, and that's how you make enough to survive. But many adjuncts that I work with are on SNAP benefits, so it's not rare.
The new food stamp
pay is
program.
terrible.
And in terms of when Anne talks about security and benefits, anything you'd add to that picture, James?
I think, you know, and spoke to this, the precariousness of life itself becomes just very difficult because at some point, everyone needs to be making plans and decisions, and it's very difficult to anticipate when one is on a contingent appointment what's next year going to look like, or even maybe next semester. Much harder to make life choices, right, that you know for certain will be beneficial for yourself and your family. I mean, leaving aside the relationship to the institution itself.
And I feel almost as if we should have a student here. I mean, what is the impact for students?
You know, I'd love to hear from Anne about this too, because I think the research is very clear that one of the key components to student retention through graduation is contact with full-time faculty members. Now, you know, that could be understood as an indictment of the quality of individual adjuncts, which is really not the case. The point is there are lots and lots of extremely talented adjunct faculty, just as there are folks on full-time appointments. The point is that the structure of employment is such that people who teach in contingent appointments are less available, there's less continuity. They may well stick around to write letters of recommendation or hold office hours, et cetera, those types of supports that students really need. But too often they're donating that time and donating that labor, whereas a faculty member on a full-time appointment, it's part of their job. It's what they're there to do. So students absolutely benefit from having a greater proportion of their faculty members be job secure and better compensated.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting $1,000 for a 16-week course, and how much love and care and attention can you give the students?
That's going to vary a lot. Often, tenure stream faculty don't have a lot of student contact. They often teach the upper level courses. They're focused on their research. So you'll often run into students who have the problem that the professor they know personally is a contingent faculty member, who, when contingents write letters of recommendation, how seriously are they taken? So the problems are many. The contingent faculty is often very committed and very close to the students, but you don't have an office. So holding office hours is, where are you going to do it? Starbucks? There are huge structural problems here. And given what students pay for this education, it's absurd.
Oh, that's what I keep thinking about. I mean, where's the money going, James?
I mean, one of the ways I think it's important for us to understand the kind of metastasized nature of the adjunct workforce is that they are effectively subsidizing the universities they work for, because the universities are saving so much on their budgets. So I think that the answer to your question about where the money goes probably changes. It's different from a place like CUNY than it would be at a large private university, for example. But I think, again, structurally, these institutions are saving a lot on the backs of many of their employees.
And they've all become businesses to one extent or another. And what I hear is complaints about high salaries going to high visibility intellectuals who are ostensibly on staff, but really not used more to kind of attract applicants, not really present for the students, as you mentioned, Anne. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the old days, was it true that people went from being adjunct and contingent to getting full-time positions? Was that right? Was it like a career track, or was it a choice? You didn't want to be committed to an individual institution? Anne?
It's never really been a career track. It does happen occasionally that you get a PhD and you teach a class here or there, and then you get a tenure track job. That does happen. But as contingency has opened, the tenure track has closed at the same time. And it's really important to think about the gender and race implications of that.
Please do.
So contingent faculty are almost very disproportionately people of color and women. And there are arguments that say that the old model in which you got a stable tenure track job and kept it forever, that was when the field of the professoriate was for white men. And when lots of women and people of color and queers started to get PhDs, that's when higher ed said, oh, they don't really need real jobs. We'll just give them this side thing. And then admins realized how profitable it was. And so now, nobody likes it anymore, but the structural change has been made and you can't undo the slide into adjunctification that we have now.
We're going to talk about some of the struggles that are taking place right now to try to address this situation. But boy, when I hear Anne describe it that way as a structural change within the quote-unquote industry, it doesn't sound unique. It doesn't sound unrelated to what we're seeing throughout our economy, namely that phenomenon of gigification, Uberification, if you like.
Yeah, people are referring now to the gig economy. Yep.
Is it distinct in the sense that, is it too distinct for alliances to be built? Or could there be real alliances around workers in the academic field and workers elsewhere? James?
Yeah, I think absolutely. That the through line that you see is the increasing dependence on workers as if the workers are entrepreneurs. And in fact, there's a real degradation of the profession, the skill, in whatever the industry may be. So, yeah, I mean, I've been very inspired by the extent to which academic workers in all kinds of titles have sought unionization, have used their collective bargaining power once they've won unions in order to push for better job security, better benefits, better pay. I think that is, over the past 2, 3, 5 years, in academic contingent workers have been really at the forefront of a lot of labor organizing. I think there's lots of opportunity and ground for common cause across industries. You
have been pretty entrepreneurial, if I understand it right, and alongside being an adjunct contingent faculty member, you've also taken jobs as, do I have this right, a truck driver, a car mechanic, an English professor?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you had to do to make ends meet?
Oh, yes, but it's also what I wanted to do. I mean, being treated with the level of disrespect adjuncts are, there are moments that it just pissed me off. And so I left and did something where I felt like I would do something meaningful that deserved some degree of respect. But also, I was briefly on the tenure track. And I didn't get promotion in tenure and nobody would hire me. And that's when I became a trucker. So it is a response to the labor market, but a kind of sideways response.
Now, I did notice that you were an SEIU organizer. Did that have anything to do you think, with you not getting that tenure track position?
No, that came later. It was mostly about being a loudmouth queer that interfered with my tenure. I wrote a book about steelworkers that are gay and trans, and, that didn't go well. So
being a loudmouth queer will do it, or at least it used to, perhaps less now than usual.
No, it's the same. This was not long ago. It's the same everywhere. They always tell you don't write the queer research until you get tenure, and they still say that, and they say that everywhere.
When we come back, you're going to get a chance to hear a bit more about what unions are doing, what adjunct and contingent workers are doing, and how perhaps there is common cause to be built across those lines of the teacher and the taught. We'll take a short break. You're watching CityWorks.
The CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies is the 25th and newest school under the CUNY umbrella. Dedicated to public service and social justice, the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies offers undergraduate and graduate degrees in the areas of labor studies and urban studies, and certificate programs in labor relations, public administration and public policy, healthcare policy and administration, and community leadership. We pride ourselves on being an institution that brings together activists and academics. Find out more at slu.cuny.edu.
We're back with James Davis, president of the Professional Staff Congress, or PSC, which represents faculty and staff right here at the City University of New York, and Anne Balay, who's an organizer with Local 509 in Boston, where she's currently organizing staff at Boston University. We're talking about the precarious work of adjunct professors, or contingent faculty, as I'm learning to call them. James, to you were in the break saying that you too were an adjunct, and then you got on tenure track, and now you're an organizer. What happened? What was that trajectory?
I mean, when I was finishing my PhD, there were very few full-time tenure track jobs. I adjuncted for 4 years at 3 different colleges and universities, and I was fortunate enough to land in a tenure track position, first at a community college and then at Brooklyn College a couple of years later. But part of what motivated me and continues to motivate me was that experience of seeing so many of my peers not have the good fortune that I had, and I didn't have anything more on the ball than them. I still don't, and it's very clear to me the extent to which higher education is not anything like approaching a true meritocracy. So, you know, to be able to really try to create better working conditions in higher education feels critical to me as a labor leader now.
Well, it feels like a good moment to ask you how the negotiations here at CUNY are going. What are the stickiest points?
They're moving, I'll say that. Related to the topic of today, you know, one of the consistent commitments over the past couple of decades of the PSC has been to try, A, to include adjunct faculty in the union more fully, and B, to put forward demands that would materially improve their lives, whether in terms of wages, job stability, benefits, and we continue to do that in this round of negotiations.
Well, thank you for what you do. Appreciate it. Anne, coming to you, we were talking before the break about sort of job security for people that take on challenging topics or who are from marginalized groups, so-called. As you look at the kind of Uberification, the gigification of this academy of ours, are you anticipating that this will lead to a kind of political chilling as well? We've seen so much progress really in our lifetimes around expanding the curriculum and so on.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that it leads to a political chilling, because in my experience, the people who are vulnerable are the people who are brave. So tenure track faculty are not risk takers. They tend to be very conservative. They deny it, but they don't challenge the power structures that provide them comfort. Whereas adjuncts have, I can assure you, not much to lose. And they're very aware of that. So they're much more likely to organize. They're much more likely to fight for grad students, to fight to improve higher education, which is so based on this fake meritocracy, and adjuncts know that and want to fix it. So there's a way that adjuncts, because they're so disrespected and so likely to be in other minority categories, know how to fight and are willing to do it and willing to be the leaders in changing what higher education can do and be.
And they are doing that. Look around the country, I'm seeing situation after situation. Which one do you want to lift up first? I mean, we had a grad student strike here at Columbia University. They've been successful, I think, mobilizations at Rutgers, NYU. That's just in the New York area.
Yeah, New School a couple of years ago, NYU, Columbia grad students, Rutgers very recently struck their part-time lecturers, made some significant gains. We were talking before the show a little bit about Columbia College in Chicago, and then very recently the Cal State Union did, I think, a one-day strike it was, and management came around and they made significant gains. So it's really inspiring to see the organizing around contingency and, as Anne said, in connection with graduate workers, because graduate students as workers are looking around at the job market that awaits them, and they see common cause with folks who have been out in the field for a while now, struggling with tough working conditions in academia.
What are you seeing in Boston, Anne?
We're kind of going in the other direction in both the St. Louis unit and the Boston unit of raising the floor. So often adjuncts at first hire start at a very low salary. So, you know, could be $3,000, $4,000, and then they have to work in a probationary period for 2 or 3 or 4 years before they get a bump to a decent salary and some measure of job security.
And just to underscore this, because it's so unfathomable for people, you're talking $3,000 for a course that requires the commitment of that person over many, many weeks.
16 weeks, yes.
Just to clarify.
And all the prep and all the grading and all the student support, especially post-COVID, student support is just an enormous time commitment. So, and that's all for $3,000 or $4,000. So what we're working to do, I'm working with a unit at BU that is trying to reduce the probationary period. At BU, new adjuncts are hired in and they have 8 courses or 4 years before they're post-probationary. And we're focusing in the bargaining we're doing right now in making the pay equal for that whole time and shortening the length of time that you can be fired with no cause of any kind. And the point of that is, first of all, new adjuncts deserve equal pay for equal work with all the other adjuncts, but also it incentivizes the university to ditch old people and hire new ones, right? If you can do it so cheaply. So thinking, how can we make the job, which is contingent, but make it a little more reasonable for everyone who does it. And we're working with grad students and with res life workers at the same time. And there are other organizing happening on campus that we work with. The janitors, the cafeteria workers, all the people who work on campus, and staff, the librarians are also fighting a contract. So if we could come together and try to get everybody's situation improved up to a certain level, that's the goal.
I mean, that kind of cross-sectoral organizing all in for the contract negotiations seems to be working in some areas of our economy these days. Is that potential here too, do you think, James?
I think it's interesting because even at a place like City University, there are a lot of job titles or functions that rely on contingent appointments. We've been talking about teaching adjuncts. Here we represent at PSC a number of different titles that also have contingent staff appointments. For example, college laboratory technicians. We have almost 500 college laboratory technicians that do everything from, computer work to bench sciences to humanities and art studios. That work also has increasingly been shifted into contingent appointments to the point where before the pandemic, there were almost as many contingent college lab technicians as there were full-time. So this is an inside the classroom issue, but also across kind of wall-to-wall within academia. And I think that recognition is important to begin doing the organizing that you're describing.
I hesitate to open this up quite so broadly, but I listen to you and I think of the conversations we have with teachers at the high school and primary level, and I think about our crises in this economy and trying to fill important positions and be competitive in the global market and keep ahead of new technology, and I just wonder what we as a society are thinking to be training or treating or teaching and training people, the people that do that work, so poorly, almost like from beginning to end. Anne, I'm sure you've thought about this, but I don't know, what do you come up with when you think about such a thing? It just feels so absurd and so upside down.
It goes back to what I said about women, people of color, and queers. Treated poorly across the board in the US, and it's very hard to make the wider culture care.
Teaching having been a disproportionately female job for many years at every level, we just don't care because women do it, and now we don't care because women and queers do it?
Yeah.
And I would say on a structural level, we find that at CUNY, there's a direct correlation really across the state of New York between the whiteness of the institution, the whiteness of the student body, and the contact with full-time faculty. Now, there has been in many states a defunding of the public education systems, and that defunding in a way has been absorbed by movement off the tenure track of significant portions of the teaching workforce. But one of the things that we're fighting for in our union is to improve the ratio of full-time faculty to full-time equivalent students. And we see it as a racial justice issue here in the city of New York. There's no reason why CUNY, that serves a student body that's 80% people of color, more than a third of whom were born in a foreign country, why they should have so much less access to full-time faculty members in their experience. And again, not a pejorative way of talking about individual part-time faculty, but as a structural question to support those students in the same way as one would find at other universities. So we're supporting a bill called the New Deal for CUNY, which includes professionalization of adjunct wages, but also includes improving the ratio of full-time faculty to students.
Well, thank you both, James Davis and Bailey. Wonderful speaking with you. That's it for CityWorks. If you have comments or questions, don't forget you can write to us at cityworks@slu.cuny.edu. For CityWorks, I'm Laura Flanders. Thanks for watching.